as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to have amnesia. In other words, forget things quickly.
Yeah.
Like an elephant. If you just keep remembering everything, you're going to freeze.
I never freeze.
Which means, all right, you made a mistake, learn from it, forget about it, move on. Because if you carry the weight of that mistake and what ifs and what if it doesn't work and how about this next time around, or it's going to be embarrassing, what are people going to think, you will just stay in this paused position for a long time, man. So look, for me, it's about having entrepreneurial amnesia.
Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast.
Hey friends, welcome back to another Fitness C episode. Super pumped up with my man, another month, Bedros Keuilian. B, welcome back to the show.
Brycey, good to be back.
All righty. So this is our last episode, at least you and I, underneath the Fitness CEO branding. It's been an awesome ride, and want to tee up a conversation about biggest mistakes in business, which, you know, we're known for success in building empires and franchise systems and nutrition supplement companies, but let's face it, we all as entrepreneurs have battle scars, so we're going to talk a little bit about mistakes, if that works for you.
Yeah, let's dive in.
All right, so why don't you walk us back, Bedros 1.0 in your entrepreneur journey, and there's a little thing called high-tech trainer.
Yeah.
If you could talk to us about that, the good, the bad, the ugly, the mistakes, and what you learned.
So there's a lot of lessons to be learned from high-tech trainer. One of my first big businesses that I started, thought of high-tech trainer in the year 2002. And high-tech trainer was supposed to be do you remember the Palm Pilots?
Oh, yeah.
It was basically before the iPhone. They had flip phones.
Before the BlackBerry, too.
Before the BlackBerry. But yeah, there were Palm Pilots that was known as a PDA, Personal Daily Assistant, right? You can keep your schedule on there and do all types of fun stuff on there. It looked like an iPhone, but it wasn't. And so the idea was that, you know, we'd create software where you can download your daily workout on the Palm Pilot and then take it to the gym with you. And then instead of a personal trainer that you would pay, whatever, $80, $90, $100 an hour to train you, this Palm Pilot would put you through a workout. Well, today there's apps and stuff that, you know, if you say, hey, I want to grow my glutes, or you want a bigger chest, or you want to burn fat, like it'll design a program and nutrition program, training program, nutrition program for you. High-tech trainer was that, but it was so early in its inception, so lots of big mistakes, but so early in its inception that we had to educate the public on, like, what do you mean you're going to have a workout on not an iPhone, a Palm Pilot, this PDA, and I'm going to walk around the gym. It's like, yeah, it tells you your sets and reps, tells you how much weight you should use based on some questions you've answered. And when you go home and you dock that PDA to your computer, it'll upload, and then it'll download your next one, right? And then tomorrow, and you see the start and end position of every exercise, and you take it to the gym with you. So if you can't afford a personal trainer, there you go. There's a personal trainer.
Dude, man, that's like wise beyond your ears.
Way ahead of time in terms of visionary, right?
That's awesome.
The problem was that not enough people had Palm Pilots, for number one. Number two, then we were like, okay, what if we sell a computer system plus 15 Palm Pilots to a big box gym? And we go, hey, obviously you guys are selling personal training. This is not here to compete against personal trainers. But the people that can't afford one-on-one personal training, all they can afford is the $29 gym membership. They can pay you maybe another $29 more per month and use the Palm Pilots. Well, guess what? The handful of gyms that actually bought that, the Palm Pilots started walking out the doors. Like people were stealing Palm Pilots, right? So they'd call us and they go, hey, you need to send us more Palm Pilots. We're like, we can't just send you Palm Pilots. Like, what the heck happened to the Palm Pilots? Like, of the 15 you gave us, we've lost 13. What do you mean you lost? Yeah, we don't know what happened to them, right? Because people are walking out with them.
Yeah.
So, all right, that didn't work. And so yet another lesson learned there. So then we went to the whole idea of like, all right, well, what if people can just download it to paper, right? They can download their workout to paper, take a piece of paper to the gym with you. So we went back to being business to consumer. So we started off business to consumer, then went to business, as in us, to gyms, big box gyms, back to business to consumer. And it was one of those things where, hey, if you have a Palm Pilot, you can download it to a Palm Pilot. Now, you can see the start and end position of every workout. You can put it all in your Palm Pilot. But if you don't have a Palm Pilot, that's okay. You can print it out on a piece of paper. Because if you remember, back then, there was something called MapQuest.
Oh, yeah.
You can say, I want to go from this part of Orange County to that part of L.A.
I used to print out those puppies before my journey to get there.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So I got the idea from MapQuest. I'm like, all right, well, look, if MapQuest can tell me how to get from Chino Hills to this particular restaurant in LA, and I just print it out, and then I make a left, make a right, get off this exit, and there you are. Like, people can do that with their workouts if they don't have a Palm Pilot. Mm-hmm. So that worked out okay. Only problem there was, a few years later, the iPhone was going to come. and it was going to absolutely destroy us, number one. But even before the iPhone came in 2007 to destroy us, right? Because I came up with the idea in 2001. We launched in 2004. So then you got 5, 6, 7, right? You got 2.5 years of starting to gain traction. But how are you going to gain traction when there's no social media yet to build a following, to build your personal brand? There's no online internet marketing yet. Google, I think, had just popped off, had been created, but there was no like Google ads. And so where were we to go to find clients? And so we were trying to go to gyms and have little like, hey, look, you can have this on your own. So imagine recruiting a whole bunch of people to go to gyms all over the country. So we did it region by region, right? Go to the gym, show them this. If they don't have a Palm Pilot, show them that. And then if they want to buy, sign them up right on the spot. They get a 50% discount for their first month, 30-day unconditional money back guarantee. But if they want to stay on board, then it's $29 a month, we just couldn't gain enough people out there, couldn't gain enough traction. So yet another problem, right? And then, of course, to try and gain market share in time to before the iPhone came out and the Android came out to just destroy us, we're out of business. And then yet another lesson there for you was I had 3 other business partners. So it was me, Jim Franco, my original mentor, and then 2 programmers who we didn't have any money to pay, so they got equity in the company. So I got 4 chefs in the kitchen. This is before I knew, like, you can have business partners who are silent business partners, and you can have business partners who are decision makers. But I was just like, all right, all 4 of us are business partners. So imagine every week when we're meeting, the 2 programmers have one idea for a high-tech trainer. Jim Franco has another idea. As the personal trainer, I have the different idea. And so there's this constant clash.
Yeah.
Ultimately, high-tech trainer was designed to fail. But the greatest lessons in it was the fact that, one, we were too early to market, number one. Number 2, too many business partners, and not enough of them were silent. We needed more silent business partners, but we needed to make that obvious from the get-go, right? We should have known what's coming ahead, which was the iPhone, and it was going to absolutely destroy us. We should have done some research to see if gyms would be, how would it work in a gym? How are we going to manage them from walking out, right? And common sense would have told you that you can't manage that from walking out of a gym unless you put some kind of metal detector or something, or iPad or whatever, Palm Pilot detector. So High Tech Trainer was designed to fail, but it was also designed to give me a lot of lessons that I would not repeat, a lot of mistakes that I would not repeat in future businesses. So that's where the value of High Tech Trainer came to me. But all in all, I ended up being in $137,000 in debt when we shut down High Tech Trainer 3 years later. And that debt had to be repaid with interest to Jim Franco.
So let's talk about that, and how did that happen, and then what was the learning lesson there?
Well, one day Jim Franco reached out to me and he said, hey, you keep coming to me for more money and more money and more money. He said, we need to have a come to Jesus meeting. I don't know if I've ever told you about this one.
No.
And I was like, I know he's Christian, but is he going to try and convert me into Christianity? Like, I didn't know what a come to Jesus, had never heard that term, right?
Yeah.
So he said, you need to come to my office when you're done with your personal training clients. We need to have a come to Jesus meeting. I was like, shit, all right, whatever that means. Great. So I'm going there thinking like he's about to baptize me into Christianity. Come to Jesus meeting, for those of you that don't know, means like shit's about to hit the fan because you've spent all that you can spend. I'm not going to give you any more money. And as of now, your debt is due, right? He was like, I'm done funding this company that's constantly failing. And so, he had that conversation with me and I was like, damn, all right, got it, Jim Franco. I'll figure out a way to pay you back. And so that's when I started really increasing my personal training business from one-on-one to small groups, because I was like, the only way I can make more money is if I can get more personal training clients. Well, I can't make more time, but I can put more people in a group. That ended up later being the future of what became Fit Body Bootcamp, large group personal training, right? So Jim Franco, while a great mentor, also had a very harsh way of teaching me lessons. And one of the lessons was the come to Jesus meeting, and rightfully so. Like, the man was like, he was our money man, right? But you could only put money out for today, I'm a money man for a lot of companies, and I will only put out money for so long before I have that come to Jesus meeting with people. And so, it's a lesson that we must all learn, that when you're borrowing someone else's money, if you don't start making them profits or paying back the loan, there will be a come to Jesus conversation. And where you're concerned, as you were starting your gyms, you had some challenges to face, right? You had some adversities to face.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure they weren't, painless in terms of building out your Fit Body Bootcamp gyms and then launching them all successfully, especially in the early stages where we didn't have all these systems and processes.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's great lessons in there for you to share.
Ooh, yeah. So let's back that story up. So we met in the summer of 2012, and at that point, I'd been on your email list for about a year, and I was in South America. We just living a life adventure, want to test my mettle and challenge myself. And as I was coming back to Southern California, I was starting to pay attention to these emails and this little thing called Fit Body Bootcamp, which we were transitioning from a licensee program into a brick and mortar franchise system. So I started paying attention and followed along, and put in an application or express some interest. And the good news, what I did is I just spent a lot of time and energy doing the research, doing the diligence, which is super important. At the time, the brand was very small in the grand scheme of things compared to what it is now. But I did take the opportunity. I think we had maybe a dozen or so licensee programs at the time that your team put me in touch with. So I started the research about the business model, about the success, which was really, really important. It gave me a good framework to understand what I was getting into. So I think from a learning lesson perspective, you got to do your research, you got to do your homework on whatever you're jumping into. And you and I like to think we're hard-charging entrepreneurs. We make decisions and we move forward on that. But I also like to think that I make calculated risks, and that's really important. So in any case, that's the story of how this came to be, and my interest was piqued. And then we met. I decided to, within 5 minutes, I was like, all right, I knew this is exactly what I would do. Decided to launch the business. And at the time, we didn't have a lot of real estate support and all that. So I had a little bit of guidance, but that was a big hurdle. I never found a real estate spot. And interestingly enough, after some reps and sets in a few months, ended up finding a real estate broker who ended up finding a lease. And after 4 months in of going back and forth in negotiation, I just realized I had to pull the trigger. So I ended up pulling the trigger, and I was just so scared. It was a 3-year lease. Now I've signed leases like 10 times the amount of what it was entailed. But it's just a good learning lesson of you just got to do the research, but it comes to a point you got to make the decision. You got to jump off the X. And I'm so glad I did. It wasn't perfect. It was, in fact, we launched in November of 2012. And actually, the quote-unquote come to Jesus I had myself is probably not the best time to launch a gym in November, about 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. But we did a couple of holiday programs. We did a fit, for holiday program. And I thought that the gym was going to explode come like January 1. Well, I didn't realize that it's not until the end of January and February when a lot of the New Year's resolutions, the hangover, happens, or the hangover passes by. The people that they're all excited, enthusiastic, they can do it themselves, and then that crashes a few weeks in. So I reached out to you probably about 2 weeks. I don't even know if you remember, but we had our other franchise business coach at the time, and I had this come to Jesus moment where I saw the vision, I knew where I wanted to go, but it wasn't working fast enough. And really, it was just greenness. It was not giving it proper time and diligence, if you will. But you met with me on a Saturday. We probably did a 3-hour coaching session. You talked me off the ledge. You gave me a couple action steps. And
I remember that day, yeah.
As we like to talk about, I take freaking action. And this is the reason we're here. So that was a big learning lesson about doing the research, doing the diligence, but also to making sure that you give it time and energy to let things roll out. And also, too, that experience taught me the value of coaching, the value of mentorship, and the value of enlisting a guide who can see around corners. So that was probably one of the first learning lessons. The second one came about a year later. I ended up launching my second location. And truth be told, I launched that location premature. I probably shouldn't have done it in the way that I did. However, at the time, my sister was going through some challenging stuff with her living situation or work situation in LA. My mom, Donna, reached out and she's like, hey, is there any way that you can help from a logistical perspective? And my sister at that period of time, she was not in fitness, and in her own words, she was a little bit overweight. But I knew she had charisma. I knew she had energy. I knew she could build a strong community. So long story short, we ended up launching that second location within about 14 months of location number one. And in hindsight, it was too quick. It was too premature. The systems, the operation wasn't on point. And truth be told, my leadership wasn't on point. So, taking a step back, what I realized is you need to make sure before you start expanding the empire, you have to have all your ducks in a row. Make sure the home front is solidified. And also, too, at that time, I just didn't have the proper skill set. However, I have drive and determination, and I had the figure it out mentality. So we ended up making it work. But those were a couple rough landings, if you will, the first 2 years of business. But that's just part of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's funny that you say it that way, because I too had that problem the other way. I was like, I'm a great marketer and a great salesman, so I can market and sell anything. And so I started building the brand. But again, the foundation wasn't there. And when you don't have that foundation that you're talking about, like, the business will begin to crumble on itself. And so the foundation is systems, the foundation is people, the foundation is processes, right? And oftentimes we just go, well, if I make a great product and market the hell out of it, like, people are going to, buy this and use it and tell their friends about it. Well, yeah, maybe. But if you don't have a foundation, what happens to the support? What happens to the systems? What happens to the leads who aren't following up, immediately, that you need to follow up with? And so foundational stuff is like probably the number one reason, like the lack of foundation, where people just go, I'm going to build it and they will come, and then they build it and it collapses. Is because there's a foundation that's missing, which is processes, people, systems, et cetera. To that point, as a CEO, now let's fast forward for a minute, because your journey is pretty rad, and how you went from being a Fit Body Bootcamp owner to a multiple Fit Body Bootcamp owner to then, now being the CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, like the franchise brand, right? And, I'm sure there's been, what's it been, since 2018?
2018.
Right, since 2018. Here we are in 2024. Like, I know the challenges and setbacks that we've had during that time, but through your lens as CEO, I'd like to know what challenges and setbacks you think were like the significant ones that you've experienced in this time that you've been in the CEO seat.
Ooh. So two things come to mind, and this is kind of a joint venture with you and I, actually. In 2018, when I joined the brand, you knew your strong vision that you needed more ownership experience in the brand, like an ownership viewpoint perspective, and I was able to provide that. Also, too, I had scaled a handful location, hard-charging entrepreneur, was successful in business, developed a strong relationship with you. So I think a learning lesson, for our audience there is whenever you're scaling and growing and, adding team members, you made a very calculated decision on that. You didn't bring me in day one, you have one interview. Like, we had been, battle together for 6 years. Granted, I was a coaching client at the time, so it was a different relationship, but it was still, good.
Yeah, I got to see what you're made of, how you think, how you process, how you problem solve.
Right.
Which gave me a lot of confidence in asking you to take that seat.
Totally, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for you, B. But I think it's a good learning lesson for audiences there, especially people are like, hey, how do I find a general manager for a gym? How about you groom a general manager for the gym? Like, start them out as a coach, then, pour into them, or start as an intern, pour into them, get them to a coach, then a head coach, test their mettle, and once they get to that point, then you can escalate into that path. But this all to say, when I joined, you had the vision that you wanted more ownership and influence in the brand and viewpoint perspective, but also, too, we didn't have a strong technology system at the time. And we decided after about 6 months of vetting, which is about a half a year, we ended up going with the wrong technology partner. And if you take a step back, I think, number one, we vetted, we looked around, we shopped around, there was many different opportunities. We also took into account that the company that we partner with, at the time, they were servicing the largest international fitness franchise on the planet, okay? Which certainly, had a lot of clout to that. However, they were a different model within the franchise system. So, taking that leverage or taking that, authority from a company that serviced another brand, certainly, though, the problem, the mistake we made, it didn't actually service our needs. And looking back, that was probably a big oversight. The second thing that we adjusted, we didn't do a proper testing mechanism within our own brand first. And we, sourced a lot of feedback. We reached out to a lot of different companies. We sourced, right? But we didn't actually take the software and put it through our own testing protocol, which we now call our agile testing system. So that was probably my entrance to the brand, our first, big kind of oversight, if you will, looking back. However, The good news is we overcame.
Yep.
And because of that, we learned a lot in the process. We're able to vet out and actually partner with a technology company that's now custom made. We went through the proper vetting and testing, and I got like a PhD in terms of how to build software on the outside looking in. It's not from a development perspective, but also going through the whole process of researching R&D, developing a test protocol, bringing on 15 franchise partners, taking them through a 90-day, a 6-month test, and then building out that, ongoing migration plan. So in the grand scheme of things, it's actually been a huge blessing, but it was, initially a bit of a challenge. So that would probably be the first thing B. And the second thing, it's not necessarily a mistake. It would probably be a mistake of government protocols and lockdowns and whatnot, but it was just, the beast of COVID. And certainly a brick and mortar franchise system in 2020, as we entered in, away from Q1 into Q2, March timeframe was not a sexy business to be in. So what I would say, it wasn't necessarily a mistake you and I made, but just, the battle lessons of going to bat for your franchise partners to realize that, hey, the sexiness of an entrepreneur, it can have its highlights. You just crushed an awesome, appearance on Salt Lake on the Limitless, arena, thousands of people. That's sexy, but people don't see the shit sandwiches that we have to eat on a daily basis. So, I think there's a lot of, learning lessons about that, about, hey, being an entrepreneur, you got to take the good with the bad, and there's a lot of both.
And so let's just take a look at those two setbacks and maybe other setbacks that you've experienced as a CEO. How's that changed or shaped your leadership style?
That's made me better. I mean, my philosophy and I know you share this as well, is like adversity is your advantage. You think about, your story about, escaping communism and coming here and living in Section 8 housing and, your mom pouring gasoline on your hair. I mean, that built character, that built resilience.
For context, before people freak out, my mom pouring gasoline on my head was because we lived in Section 8 housing. I got lice. She washed my hair with gasoline that my dad siphoned out of a parked car because it was cheaper to use gasoline than it was to go to the drugstore and buy lice treatment. So, folks, please don't call Child Protective Services for me. My mom's dead anyway. They can't arrest her, and I'm a grown-ass man.
Small little detail. Thank you, B. Yeah. But no, for me, I mean, it's interesting, and you shine a light in this. I didn't grow up in socialism or communism in a literal perspective, but I grew up in the figurative perspective. My father is a drug addict, addicted to alcohol and gambling, not the trifecta for a good family upbringing. Right. And in that particular environment, what I would say is very volatile would be the best way. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we just shared in a podcast we just recently shot about, you growing up in Armenia and Soviet Union, communist Armenia, about censorship and fear. And I feel like when I was a younger guy, like fear, you didn't know how my dad was going to react when he came back. And my dad wasn't actually a bad guy. He was just a sloppy guy. He was just sloppy drunk. And, so unfortunately things would tick him off and, upset him, and things would just go off the hinges at time. But that all said, that adversity built, a character for me. It built the adversity quotient. And when we get up every single day, we have the burden of leadership. You have the weight of a franchise, the weight of an empire on your shoulder, and it's not for the faint of heart. We don't get to this position because we're not lifting weights. It's because we are putting in the reps, we're putting in the steps, both physically but also emotionally from a business context. So, to put a bow on it, come back, adversity makes you better, and I would rather be in business with a business partner that's battle-tested versus very green, that one little, setback here or there is going to throw you in a conundrum. That's just no way to operate.
Yeah. I'm just going to keep rolling with this because that leads me to another question that I think is pretty interesting. And you somewhat answered it with the whole technology partner.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious to know if there's any other, like, if you look back, is there any decision that you made looking back as a CEO that you wish you had approached differently?
Oh, good question. I'm going to refer to it not as a CEO as the brand, but back when I was a CEO of one of my locations. Yeah. And this is back in 2017, 18. I was, in the process of selling one of my locations, and I didn't have that vision. Actually, why I was a little hesitant to take on the VP and then eventually the CEO role when you first offered it to me in 2018 is because I had my vision. I was going to build 10 locations. I was halfway there, and it was just a different opportunity. It took me a quick second to kind of take a step back and realized, you know what, I can have a bigger impact if I, link up with you in this particular role. But right around that time, I was looking to sell a location, and as it turns out, I ended up recruiting and getting someone who was interested in buying the location, and we went through the diligence process and all that, and actually onboarded him as a coach, and got him positioned to potentially buy the business. It turns out the deal fell through, and it was actually benefit to my location, my clients, my team, and probably him in hindsight, to truth be told.
Yeah.
But one of the mistakes I made is when I first launched that location, we were upstairs, okay, at in this particular complex, and about 2-3 years down the road, my landlord offered to move downstairs at a really good rental rate, but he was just sick and tired of our location making a lot of noise downstairs because we run fitness gyms.
Right.
So he gave a pretty sweetheart deal to move us down. And I didn't know at the time, but I should have spent more diligence, even though we got the correct permits, the certificate of occupancy. Well, as it turns out, in the city that I live, the occupancy, the permits don't transfer from the business, they actually transfer per location. So as it turns out, I had to refile for all that. And in this particular process, I learned of that in the moment, but I actually didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal in order to transact the business. But the person that was potentially interested in buying was a big hang up for him. So understandably so. So as it turns out, I had to go through a diligence process. It took me 6 months to actually go through the process, refile for the permits. And in fact, when I went through that particular process, the city, they thought, whoa, what's going on here? And at that period of time, my footprint had expanded. When I first launched the location, I had a few clients. Now I had 300 locations, we were on the map, and the city wasn't necessarily on board with the zoning and permitting. And they actually, I came into boot camp one day, and there's a pink slip saying that we have been declined our application and that we had 90 days to vacate. So as you'd imagine, I'm like, holy shit, B, like, what the hell am I going to do? But, at the end of the day, we're fighters. So I went down to the city, I pitched my case, ended up getting a hearing. And I wasn't saying, hey, my name is Bryce, I'm a business entrepreneur. This is this, that, and the other. This is the reason that you should have my business here. I talk from the heart. Our obesity epidemic of what's going on. It's 80% of our population is statistically obese or overweight. There's a massive problem here. And I just spoke my passion, the vision to inspire fitness and change lives was our mission here at Fit Body Boot Camp. And long story short, everything got approved. And as it turns out, the deal actually went away, which was a good thing. But what I learned in hindsight is always taking a proactive approach is way better to take the reactive wait and see approach. And I feel like Bryce 1.0 and many entrepreneurs that I see, they take the wait and see approach, and that typically goes out to bite you in the butt. So from a CEO perspective, always be proactive, always be assertive. That's the big message from that story.
That's interesting. So how would you have handled that differently, like knowing what you know now?
Oh, I mean, first and foremost, as soon as we got moved down from when our landlord asked us to move from upstairs to downstairs, I would have reached out to the city, made sure all the permits were cleared, filed for the updated certificate of occupancy, even though it was a big pain in the ass and I didn't actually agree with the permitting I had to do, I would have taken action proactively, first and foremost. Yeah. And also, too, in the business negotiation, even though there was a lot of shit on the other side from that potential partner that was going to assume the business, that didn't happen, I would have handled that situation. I would have been maybe a little bit more proactive with him as well. So those were a couple things, in hindsight, I would have done differently that would have led to a better outcome.
Reminds me of a quote that I heard, which is, in entrepreneurship, it's not a win or lose, it's a win or learn. It's like you either win or you learn. My high-tech trainer story was certainly several learning experiences so that I could make better decisions with the next business. Mm-hmm. This experience that you just talked about, again, you are now super proactive in everything you do for our franchise brand here. And I think a lot of that lesson came probably from that experience and other experiences like it. So we either win or we learn. And when someone starts seeing it that way, you're more likely to start taking those risks that we talk about as entrepreneurs. Like, we are entrepreneurs, you are going to take a risk. You don't know really what the outcome is going to be. You hope that you stack the odds in your favor by making the right decisions, having the right people, having the right processes. Mm-hmm. But still, something catastrophic could happen, like the pandemic, and there goes our plan. Like, we spent a year and a half building up to the pandemic to create kind of Fit Body 2.0, thinking that, in 2020, we're about to launch Fit Body 2.0. Really what we ended up doing is trying to figure out how we're going to salvage the brand when it was under attack for a whole year.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes the most calculated decisions that we make end up still biting us in the butt, but we've learned that, okay, it's all a lesson and there's no losing here. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing.
Let me ask you this, B, kind of flipping back to your initial kind of point in the learning lesson, go high-sec trainer. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, okay, how do I overcome the adversity? How do I bounce back? And it's interesting. On one hand, adversity is just so mission critical important because it gives you the battle scars. It gives you learning lessons. On the other side, it can make some people a little hesitant because they've failed or they got burned here. Kind of like, a little kid, you put your hand on the stove, you get burned, and then you don't want to do that again. So how have you been able to navigate some of the blunders or the mistakes and you keep on charging hard? And I like to think I'm in the same way, but I would love some perspective on that and some lessons for our audience.
Yeah, so a long time ago, I don't know if it was Dean Graziosi or Brandon Bouchard, but both of those guys I was in a mastermind with. And the mastermind all three of us were in was Joe Polish's Genius Network Mastermind. And I don't remember it was Dean Graziosi or Brandon Bouchard, but one of them said, as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to have amnesia. And in other words, forget things quickly.
Yeah.
Because like an elephant, if you just keep remembering everything, you're going to freeze, right? Like they say elephants have like this impeccable memory. Yeah. And so you got to have entrepreneurial amnesia, which means, all right, you made a mistake, learn from it, forget about it, move on. Because if you carry the weight of that mistake and what ifs and what if it doesn't work and how about this next time around or it's going to be embarrassing, what are people going to think? You will just stay in this paused position for a long time, man. So, look, for me, it's about having entrepreneurial amnesia.
Yeah. And like the analysis by paralysis is the worst possible place you can be as an entrepreneur, to be, in a situation where shock and awe and you take no action. It's the exact opposite. As an entrepreneur, you have to be in motion. You have to be taking action. And that's how you build the empire, my friend.
Yep. I don't think people think that it's like you make this plan and on the planning document, as long as you cover all your bases, when you go to execute the plan, it's going to work out exactly as the plan was developed. And I think the only place the plan is perfect is on paper.
Yeah.
Like once you launch, like there's a million pivots, some macro, some micro, that have to take place to create the desired outcome. But I don't know of any one plan. Like even I recently learned like Airbnb was designed to be a very different model originally. And then it became this thing where everyone that owns a home or something can rent their home out for a day, for a week, for a month, right? Long-term or short-term rentals. But that wasn't the model that it was supposed to be. Like it was launched with a very different model. I forget what it was.
Well, look at your model, B. When you first launched, actually, probably a good way to kind of take us out and wrap up this episode is just give a little insight on the pivot you made from, one, being a one-on-one personal trainer, then to pivoting to outdoor boot camp in a park, then to cheerleading studios, then a brick-and-mortar franchise. I'd love to tee that up.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point.
Yeah.
It's those constant pivots where you see refinement, and you go, this is the model. And then you go with it. But if I didn't constantly refine, look, one of the reasons I could have stopped doing outdoor boot camps, so, we live in Chino Hills. It's an equestrian town, lots of hills with horses on it, like that are kind of free range, but they're fenced in, right? But they're just free ranging on the hills. And where I ran the at the time it was called Chino Hills Outdoor Boot Camp, was at Butterfield Ranch Park here. And literally it's like the fence, and then the horses would come up to the fence of the park. So like my clients would run by and kind of pet the horse on the nose.
Well, they're doing a battle.
Yeah. Bro, one morning I get there, and there's like horses all at the park. Turns out there was a breach in the fence. Like, I don't know if a horse pushed through or like something was unlocked, but there was horses at the park, like just kind of wandering around, not trying to attack anybody, but they were just wandering around. And I was like, okay, this won't work. Like, I can't just be like, because I was like, already, it was winter time. It would like rain every now and again. And the clients, like, as soon as it rained, like 1/10 of the clients showed up to the workouts because like they don't want to get wet at the park, right? So I already knew I'm dealing, okay, inclement weather doesn't help, right? But then right around that same time, like 3 horses are walking through the park where they're not supposed to be, and people are freaking out. I'm like, all right, this is not a business model to run. Now I could have been like, well, it looks like boot camp doesn't work then, but instead it was like, okay, how can I bring it indoors? Well, I didn't want to go rent out a brick and mortar yet because I wasn't sure if it would work indoors. So I was like, all right, what could I do? What could I do? What could I do? Aha, gymnastic centers. Gymnastic centers are empty until about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When kids get out of school, parents bring them there to do gymnastics. What if I talk to a gymnastics center and say, hey, could I bring some equipment, dumbbells, kettlebells, sandbags, things like that, put them in the corner, and in the morning times run indoor boot camp here, and that model worked. In fact, when you look at the flooring at a Fit Body Bootcamp location, it's that 1.25-inch carpet bonded foam that you're going to find at a gymnastics center. And for the longest time, it was the same color, that blue, right? Which is why Fit Body Bootcamp colors are still blue. It's a nod to where we started at the gymnastics centers. Today, we've got our own custom color through the flooring company that we have partnered with. But and then once I realized, okay, this model works, but people want evening classes. Well, I'm going to have to figure out how to run evening sessions. Well, okay, now it might be time. And even then, went from gymnastics center to light industrial, and then to actual commercial storefronts.
Pivot, adjustment, the life of a freaking entrepreneur.
That's what it takes. That's what it takes. And again, micro and macro pivots are necessary because the plan is only perfect on paper.
Mic drop.
Right.
Well, B-Man, I mean, this has been an awesome episode. I don't know if you want to close this out with some final thoughts, but really the whole goal here was just talk a little bit about the good, the bad, the ugly in business, because we have all of it.
That's exactly it. And if you're willing to do those macro and micro pivots, you're willing to create the foundational stuff first. And it's not sexy creating processes and systems and all those things. It's just not.
No.
What's sexy is like, okay, I got a product or a service. I'm going to put it out there and market it and sell it. Like, that's sexy because then you win something. You get that dopamine hit of like, I got money in exchange for a product or service that they're using and people are talking about it. But you sell enough of that without having a foundational systems, processes, and people, like this thing will collapse on itself. And I think that's the biggest lesson is be willing to make the pivots. It's not losing, it's learning. Mm-hmm. And without the foundation, the business will topple on itself. So build that foundation, do the unsexy work so that you can do the sexy work and scale.
Boom. All right, my friend. Well, but B, that was such a mic drop moment. Why don't you take us out for this episode?
All right. Well, guys and gals, thank you for watching and listening to this episode of the Fitness CEO Podcast. And, of course, be sure to leave comments and positive reviews if you got value from this episode. And until then, on behalf of Bryce and myself, we'll see you next time.